Honored to have Bishop Emeritus Dave Brauer-Rieke with us. I am so grateful for David. He just did a great job as our bishop. And I remember the speech that you made during the bishop election. And you talked about that kind of vision you had walking along the coast. And you saw the past, the present, and the future. And I just thought, man, that is the Holy Spirit speaking. And so I think you were a wonderful bridge pastor, towards what's coming next. So thank you for that. And you are a model for me because in retirement, you've gotten really involved in some issues that we need to talk about. And I want to be heavily involved as I retire in 10 days in the climate change issue. I think that's the issue of the day. So you inspire me. But shall we call you Pastor David or Bishop David, or?
If you were comfortable just calling me Dave or David, I would be great.
All right.
I've invested in my baptismal vocation. So
all right. Yeah.
It's good enough for my parents. It's good enough for you all.
All right. So David has immersed himself in disaster preparedness and works with a team of people for the Synod. So we're grateful to have you at the end of a series after Rob kind of set us up with a 30,000 foot view and what can we do in Oregon and legislation. And then we had to talk about weatherization. We missed the one on the county sustainability. And now it's okay. Things are coming, things are here. So we'll let you take it away. You are being recorded, by the way.
I saw that. Thank you.
Yep. Yes. Is that all right?
I've got nothing to lose anymore. So we'll just we'll just let her go.
Let her rip.
Yeah. So
right.
Thank you for the kind and gracious introduction, John. John and I have tag teamed as fellow clergy for a number of years, and it's been a joy. And June 6th, we're going out for beer. So that's good.
That's good to me.
Or soon after.
Yeah.
And it looks like, with the possible exception of you, Dad, most of us here are retired and dealing with. My wife says, you got 30 years left. You're not sitting around the house reading books. That's not what's going to happen. So go out, make some money, be useful, get out of my. So what I would like to do, if it makes sense to all of you, is about 15 minutes of yakking at you, sort of to set the context, and then just open up for us and having conversation. Does that sound okay? Mm-hmm. So let me give you the advertisement first. I'm going to share my screen. The advertisement is this. This website is www.ldrwest.org. LDR for Lutheran Disaster Response, ldrwest.org. It's something I'm putting together for the work that I do. The Western region of Lutheran Disaster Response is the area from Alaska to Hawaii, and from the West Coast into Montana, Wyoming, New Mexico, that swath, right? So it's 13 states, 11 ELCA synods, and we are bound together in some really interesting environmental ways. That's not why we're divided that way. It just happens to be circumstance like that. But I wanted to show you this this website for a couple of reasons. First of all, let me introduce the person who I work with. So if you go to ldrwest.org, under resources, there's a newsletter tab. If you click on the newsletter tab, you'll see here an opportunity to subscribe to our newsletter. It's free. Why would you not want to do that? And under here, it says you can read or download the entire issue online, which you can do. So if you click on that, you'll see the newsletter. We just started a new newsletter called Upsurge, and it's not surging. Where are you, Upsurge? Okay, we'll do that differently. I'm not sure let me introduce Sarah to you this way. This woman here on the screen is Sarah Kruger. Sarah has just started a new job with Lutheran Disaster Response called a Regional Resiliency Representative. We will talk about the word resilience in a few minutes, but she is tasked with helping all of us in the Western region think about what it means to be in resilient communities. And resilience has to do with taking climate change seriously. It has to do with taking racial inequity and injustice seriously. It has to do with disaster preparation because that's our task. I work part-time with Sarah to do whatever she tells me to do, or a few times like this, other things as well. But Sarah is somebody you should know. So I wanted to give you that sense of the newsletter, www.ldrwest.org/newsletter if you want. Also under the resources tab is something called the Congregational Network. Pastor John mentioned to me that you as a congregation sometimes think about what you could do for disaster preparedness. A great place to start would be to join our Region 1 network. We meet once a month for an hour and a half and talk about what our congregations are doing, learn skills together, swap stories, success stories, new learnings. So John, the person to get hold of for that would really be Jan Weirma. Be prepared at OregonSynod.org, or you can contact me. But so that's what I do with Lutheran Disaster Response, very part-time now, about quarter-time. But yeah, I started in March of 2020. My task was resiliency, specifically around climate change. Do you remember what happened in March of 2020? COVID came, everything fell off the table. Just everything fell off the table, including the work I was going to do. So we got pointed. All right, that's the advertising. This is a Google map. Up here on the left is what city? Everybody say it now. This is Portland.
Portland, PDX.
Portland.
This is Portland. You can just leave your mics off as far as I'm concerned. This is Portland, and this is the suburbs. Here's I-205, I-5. What I want you to see here is that Portland, and this is the topographical map, right? Portland is pretty much gray and white because what are we looking at?
Cement.
Yep, cement and concrete. I live right here by Mount Tabor Park, by Laurelhurst Park. It's a little bit greener. Actually, if you start to zoom in here, you'll see that there are trees, right, and lawns there. But when you zoom out, it looks gray, that gray, that same sense. Now, living close to Laurelhurst Park, I live in a nice part of town. It's known for its old trees on the streets and things. And in fact, my part of town on hot summer days is about 5 degrees cooler than Portland proper, especially the industrial area of Portland, because the trees keep us cool. But that's where I live. Now, let's look where you live. You live, I got lost. There you are. You're this red dot here. Prince of Life Lutheran Church. What do you notice about the look of this map?
It's green.
It's green.
Greener.
This is why you live down here, right?
Yeah.
You live in what's called the WUI, what insurance companies and disaster people call the WUI, W-U-I. That stands for Wildlife Urban Interface. Wildlife Urban Interface. That's why you have coyotes and deer running around your yard and an occasional cougar, because you live close to that place. And those poor critters are losing their home and they're coming in to live with you. But you live in the WUI, the Wildlife Urban Interface. That makes what sort of disasters close to you?
Wildfires.
Wildfires, absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But just I wanted to give you a picture of why where you live is different than where I live in the state of Oregon. Now, as you may know, the West Coast as a whole is 20 years into a very serious drought. This is a drought map. It's updated at least once a week. So this is current as of May 19th. You can look at this map and it breaks up into regions. If you click on the Western region, you will get a picture of what the map looks like closer to home. Here's the code. White areas are normally wet. not overly wet, but sort of like this is the way we usually have been over the past 50, 100 years. Yellow areas are abnormally dry. Salmon colored areas are moderate drought. So if you start to look here where you all live, you're going to get into the moderately drought, severe drought, extreme drought is red, and the dark brown is exceptional drought. What do you notice about the map?
More drought than not.
Yeah. This, my friends, is still late May.
Yeah.
Right? If we back up again to look at the whole United States, you know, this drought is down here. It's getting brown. I guarantee you come back in 2 or 3 weeks, this map is going to look a lot worse all through the summer. Now, I said we're in the middle of a 20-year drought. Here's an article from the New York Times. Here's 2021. That was last year, 2000. So here's those 21 years. These maps are from June, early June, just a month from now. We've had a couple good years like 2019, 2017, 2011, 2000. But look at the maps overall. What do you see?
Lots of extreme drought.
Yeah.
Lots of extreme drought.
Mm-hmm.
So people who know things say the West Coast is in the worst drought they've had in 1,200 years.
Wow.
Over 1,000 years, it hasn't been this bad. Now, you all are talking about climate change, right? You think this has anything to do with climate change?
I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, of course it does, right? So this is a drought that's a series of years of droughts which are getting worse. What does a drought map mean? For a drought map, they look at temperature, they look at precipitation, and a number of other indicators of moisture. Combine all of those, and they say extreme drought, moderate drought, whatever. But if you look at last year, even in early June, it was terrible, right? Even in early June, it was terrible. And I can almost guarantee you this summer is going to start to look like these maps in here real quick. And the drought, while it's in Arizona, New Mexico, California, is more and more moving up into Oregon. Now, Oregon has always had fires. We've always had fires. Washington has always had fires. Where have they been?
Somewhere else.
Somewhere else. Mostly east of the mountains, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In those dry areas. Pine forests, slower growing forests, dry areas. And you get a fire over there and it's sad, but it's not a disaster. It's not a natural disaster, because the definition of a natural disaster is when a natural hazard like flood, fire, hurricane interacts with human beings, right? So when a fire burns down houses, that's different than when a fire burns down trees. The first is a disaster. The second is bad news for the timber industry. But in Washington and Oregon, the fires used to be on the east side. And because those forests are slow growing, you'd burn out an area and you were fine for a number of years. The fires are now moving into the western forests, west of the forest, west, which is why you all had problems a year or two ago, right? Because they're coming over here. And a difference with the western region, west of the mountains, is those forests grow fast. So relatively speaking, right? So you can have a fire here in the west, and alders are going to spring up again, you know, grasslands are going to spring up again, and you may well get repeat fires in the same vicinity in a relatively short time, the way you didn't in the east. I just want to show you this map. This is a different kind of drought map, and this one's from May 2022. So this is just like 2 days ago, right? This map shows the amount of moisture in the soil, which is another definition of drought, right? I said there are other drought maps do temperature, precipitation, a number of factors. This is just moisture in the soil. The brown is like 1 to 2% moisture in the soil. That's nothing. The dark blue gets up to 90, 100% moisture in the soil. So there's lots of moisture in the soil out here in the Olympic Peninsula right now. But look where we live, right? Just west, just east of you, up on Mount Hood, and all through this region. There is no water in the soil. no water in the soil. And we depend upon good flows from the snowpack in Mount Hood and areas, Cascades, to give us water, right? How's that going for us? If you got any farmer friends, ask them, right? No moisture in the soil, nothing we can do about it. So just quickly, just another picture. Here's Oregon, satellite picture of Oregon, the way we like it to look, right? Here's Oregon in fire season.
Mm.
What's the difference? Smoke, right?
Yeah.
This isn't even a bad picture, but here's you right here, right? Here's you right here. You all learned how to read atmospheric pollutants a year ago, didn't you? You learned how to check the weather, and it had a new statistic for you, right? And you decided whether you could go out for a walk or not, depending upon the smoke. So this is a serious issue for us. So you experienced, and I'm just picking on you because it's more fun than picking on me. You experienced fires not far from your church. You experienced extreme heat. You experienced smoke. And the question is, was that a bad year, or is that a foretaste of the feast to come? We don't know, but I'll tell you what I think. You look at those drought maps, this persistent issue, I think this is not good news. And not only for us, but here's a picture of, artificially highlighted for different fires going on in the West. The jumping green and brown spaces are our smoke going across the country. So you may have read a year and a half ago about smoke from Oregon fires in New York City. They did not write and thank us for that, right? But if you look at what happens from the smoke, it can go all sorts of different places. But here's a map from 2018, I think, showing where the smoke goes. So, just a taste of part of the situation. Drought, wildfires, heat domes, smoke are all, in my opinion, climate change driven disasters. I think there's very little question about that. And it's not just these things, it's just that those are the things that are happening around your home, right? Hurricanes are getting worse and more frequent. Floods are happening in different areas. We had this really bizarre freeze that went all the way down to Texas 2 years ago. Remember that, right? The reason for that freeze was the North Pole was too hot. Now, not hot, but warmer than it used to be, sent air up, spilled over the jet stream, and flowed down into the country. The jet stream's disrupted. Our normal patterns are all disrupted. So climate change has disrupted a lot of weather patterns, and it's making a difference in our lives. So that's just a reality I wanted to start with you. I know you've had conversations in this series about the overarching issue of climate change, right? So you've
Yep.
had kind of the 30-foot level about that. John said you want to kind of drill down a little closer to home. So let me ask you what I just told you, but what effects do you think you're experiencing where you live from climate change?
Well, the heat, of course.
Heat, 3-digit heat.
Yeah.
I mean, up above 100 in Portland and
Yeah.
Oklahoma City, for heaven's sakes. Oh my goodness, that's crazy. Heat
And I told you, Dave, that we had a 3-day cooling shelter
yes,
last June.
yeah,
Never done that before.
never needed it before,
Yep.
right? But a cooling shelter. Why did you do a cooling shelter?
Because people's lives are in danger
Whose
if they didn't
lives?
have air conditioning. Generally, people who couldn't afford, the comforts of air conditioning. Folks out on the streets.
Name them: homeless, houseless people out on the streets. Who else?
Low income.
Low income people, elders.
Yeah.
Anybody in apartments for the most part.
Apartments for the most part, absolutely. Do we have air conditioning in Portland? No, we don't. For heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
It's not our, now, if you're lucky enough to have a heat pump, you got air conditioning just as a freebie, right? But I'll tell you, heat pumps are really laboring when you get into over 100, just like they labor when you get down below freezing, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, so yeah, you did as a church out of your Christian mission and witness, a 3-day cooling shelter because people's lives are at risk. And people did die in the Pacific Northwest because of that. And we learned a new term, heat dome.
Yeah.
We learned a whole new term, a lot of new language coming at us. Right? We've just been dealing with floods up in Whatcom County, up in Washington, around that area. New term, atmospheric river.
Yeah.
Anybody know what an atmospheric river is?
Pineapple Express.
Yeah, it's a Pineapple Express. That's what we used to call from Pineapple Express.
Yeah.
Why is it coming up to northern Washington instead of California where it belongs? Thank you very much. Right?
Yeah.
Well, it's not the first time that's happened, but it's an indication again of changing weather patterns of lots of things that are in flux for us weather-wise. So I asked you what you experienced in terms of climate change that's impacting your lives. You said heat. What else you got for me?
Well, for us, it's cooler.
I'm sorry, Joyce, what?
I said, for us, it's cooler because we've been here almost, it'll be 9 years in October, but we lived in Las Vegas. So, you know,
That's why you
105 was anything up less than 105 was comfortable.
Yes.
Got over that. You didn't go outside until later in the evening, but.
So you know, for Joyce, for you and Gary, if you lived in Las Vegas, this is no big deal, right?
It is a big deal.
Well, it's less of a big deal. You know how to deal with it, right? I laugh. My wife and I went to school in Minnesota for 4 years, right? I grew up in Seattle. They have snow. It gets cold. I mean, it gets so cold back in Minnesota, St. Paul, where we were, that when you get in your car and push the clutch down, it doesn't come back up. Oh. I mean, and your tires freeze with the flats. So when you start going, they go womp, 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 womp. I mean, no human being should live there. But here in Portland, right, in the news, they will take a picture of a single snowflake
Yeah.
into the ground, right? So heat or cold, we don't know those things. So part of that's just we're wimpy because of where we live. But the important impact is we're not prepared for that kind of weather. So people die with high heat. They don't die in the same way in Las Vegas or you know, because they're more prepared in different ways.
Yeah, but there are cooling shelters for houseless.
Yeah. So here we have different challenges, and as the church, I would just say, is the church that calls us to ministry in a different way. Right? Okay, so we got heat. That wasn't actually a new thing. We still got heat. What else you got? We've been talking about a couple of things. What do you got?
Less snow, less snowpack.
Okay, less snowpack up on the mountain, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is not a natural disaster.
No, but
if you own a ski resort, it feels pretty bad. But it gives us less water.
Yeah.
So you talk to farmers east or west of the mountains, and they're not getting the water.
or less rain too, less rain overall.
Less rain, right. So in Pendleton, I used to live in Milton Freewater, which is in Eastern Oregon. In Pendleton, they actually have started putting water back in the aquifer in the winter because the water levels are dropping from farming, right? And the aquifers, right, and they're putting water back in, and water, that makes me nervous as heck. I mean, you put bad water in there and it's going to kill the whole aquifer. They say it's not an issue, right? We put good water in the aquifer, but that's an adaptive technique that we're now doing, right? But yeah, water's pretty important to farming.
Are you asking for natural disasters?
Yeah. Well, what are you worried about in your part of the world?
Wildfires.
Yeah, wildfires, absolutely.
Yeah. Molalla is a town about, 25 minutes south of Oregon City, maybe half an hour. The flames were right on the other side of Molalla. Our church was a mile outside the evacuation zone. So I forget, it was what was the day? Was it on a Thursday that we were told to evacuate? and you couldn't even move in the streets of Oregon City. The traffic was so dense with people trying to escape. We had mobile homes in our parking lot. People from Malala. We had I don't think we had any animals, but Carl Hansen called me and said, "Can you take some goats in your parking lot?" I said, "Sure." He ended up putting them somewhere else, but yeah, we were being called upon to be an evacuation site.
So thank you for responding. And John, you asked me, we'll try to get there, about what Prince of Life can do in terms of, you've been a cooling shelter,
Yeah.
but that's one of them, right? People, if they're evacuating or fleeing, need places to park.
Mm-hmm.
They need places to go to the bathroom. They
Right.
need places to plug in their cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
So churches have an opportunity. And a lot of our churches, Oregon Synod churches, open up their parking lots. That seems like a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a little smarter, you'll have some big, long power strips.
Mm.
If you have any outdoor plugins, which most of us don't anymore, but if you do, you can plug in those power strips so people can just plug in their phones.
Right.
Or things like that. That's not small potatoes kind of thing. It's a big deal. So yeah, parking lot is a pretty easy of give and ask for those sorts of things, and very important. Now, so you all almost had to evacuate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's levels of evacuation urgency. So the lower level, which would have caused you to leave, would be of concern too. But most likely, you would have come home to your house,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I was home at my house, and then we were level 2. We found out about noon, shortly after lunch, and we were on a Zoom call with our financial advisor. And she saw it on her map, and she says, "Okay, when you load up, take this, this, and this, and this for sure, And we have a travel trailer and a pickup. The pickup was loaded, the trailer was loaded, and the car was loaded. And then my neighbor and I were standing out on our street looking down at the crossroad, which was our way out. And there was no way. I've never seen bumper to bumper traffic on that street on Maple Lane.
So you start to learn.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, and it's kind of like, do we have an evacuation plan? Not only as a family, but as a community. I mean, if when we had a dry run, you couldn't move, that's going to make you think, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I'm going to go stay with my kids when it's level 4 and nobody's trying to get out of town yet. I mean, that wouldn't be a dumb thing to do, right?
Level 1.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, excuse me, level 1. I got that backwards, right? But so another thing a congregation can do, and this is what the Congregational Network is partly about, is what should we be thinking about as families? Most of us are pretty intent on thinking about families first. And there's some good conversation that can be had. You mentioned a go bag. That is, your financial advisor says, take this and this and this and this.
Mm-hmm.
You ought to have this and this and this and this in a bag ready to go all the time.
Mm.
What is this and this and this and this? Well, there's lots of lists on the internet, or I could get you, right? What do you think you should have in a go? It's called the go bag. Just grab and run. What do you think you should have in there?
Well, we did evacuate because our daughters ganged up on us, and one's in Seattle and one was in south of Roseburg, and they called up at the same time and said, get out of there, because they were watching it. So Gary can tell you all the stuff. We packed a couple of days' clothes, photos, as much as we could get in the car, the dog and her food, and the like insurance policies for the house, the car, life insurance policies, all those kinds of things. Oh yeah, passports. What else did we have in there?
Let's see. I thought of it, but then
Financial information.
we did have some financial information.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of documentation, meds, if you take prescription meds,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we took all
Charger
that.
for your cell phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of things here that would be thought about. And again, now, John and Christine Core, John Core is on the Oregon Synod Disaster Response Team. He knows this stuff. He's a shortwave operator. He's been doing this his whole life, right? They had just remodeled their cabin, which is now their retirement home, down in the valley just east of Eugene. That's where the Labor Day fires were, right? He and Christine were in their home just doing whatever they do in the evening. There was a knock at the door. a volunteer with the fire department says, you need to leave now because of fire. John says, how long do you have? They said, you leave now. And I'm not leaving till I see you drive out of the parking lot. Right? So this fire had started with strong winds, down trees, power lines, started a fire, but a 60-mile-an-hour wind. And you talked, John, about seeing the fire over Malala, right? You don't know fear till you see this strong wind starting to push this fire towards you really fast, right? I said, you just have to leave now. Now, John knows how to do this stuff, but, right, he said, my wife got her mother's wedding rings out of the drawer. We got the dog. We grabbed, didn't take food, didn't take change of clothes. I took the wrong car. I took the cheap car instead of the good car. And their whole home burned to the ground and their car just became slag.
Oh.
And anything that Christine had a lifelong collection of Santa Clauses. Just lost, right? I mean, and photo albums, Joyce, you mentioned photos and things like that, right? So you can't put all those things in your go bag, right? But what you can do is have documents in the cloud. What you can do is, have photos scanned in the cloud. It just depends what's important to you, right? But you got to think about that ahead of time because it's too late when the fire is knocking at your door. So that's preparation stuff at congregation, or I think it's interesting outreach ministry can do with their neighborhood. Let's talk about what you do. Or you can do this with your own neighborhoods. You don't need to have the church involved, right? If you got a neighborhood group, just have a barbecue. Say, let's just talk about what would happen if, right? I mean, if people have kids, do you have a communication plan to reach your kids? If the cell phone towers go down, which they will in certain kind of disasters, if that was your only plan for getting a hold of your kids, you're in deep trouble, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just trying to say there's some things here to think about. So fires, you got heat, you got fires, smoke, we mentioned, right?
Earthquake, but that's not climate change.
Earthquake is not climate change, right? We got the big one, right? We're all
Right. It's coming.
It's coming.
There was an earthquake this morning.
I'm sorry, what was that, George?
There was an earthquake this morning near Malala.
Oh,
2.7, I think they said. Which you wouldn't feel too much. We didn't feel it, but some people on next door said they felt it.
Yeah, it's an unusual thing for us here.
Yeah.
Although there are fault lines all over the Pacific Northwest, we're concerned about one in Pacific. And specifically, that's the one that runs off the subduction zone, Cascade subduction zone off of the Washington, Oregon, California coast. Right? When that one slips, the big one, right? Everything's going to come tumbling down. Does not mean you're dead. It does not mean you're dead. But it means a whole lot of problems. A whole lot of problems. Charlene Larson, who goes to First Grace in Astoria. She's deep into the disaster work for the Synod. She says, I'm collateral damage when the big one comes. She lives not far from 101. She goes, I'm gone. I mean, that whole area is just going to kind of disappear. But you guys aren't, right? Now, water that goes underneath the Willamette from eastern Portland from Beaverton, Hillsborough into Portland, all those bridges are down. All the water electricity is down, right? So they ain't going anywhere unless you got a boat. I mean, think about that, right? That's a long river. If the bridges aren't there, you're not going home. Chris Kramer, Chris John, he's a pastor in Bend, Oregon. He goes, oh yeah, when the big one comes, we're the new Salem. And he's serious. The state has a plan to move state offices to Bend.
Wow.
Out of Salem, if they don't need to go further. I've got people in our Western region LDR in Eastern Oregon, Idaho, whatever, saying, well, that won't affect us. I'm going, oh, it will. You're not going to shake. But all of a sudden you got how many people in cars coming your direction? Spokane, Coeur d'Alene, Bend. I mean, how many motel rooms do you guys have? How many public restrooms do you guys have? we're talking thousands and thousands of people. So Lyle, Maple Street's nothing,
Oh,
and you know that. So, but earthquakes are not climate induced, and the big one is its own reality.
Mhm.
But smoke, fire, drought, wind, possible freeze, right?
I don't know if the freeze that we had, was it a year ago in February, was climate related, but it sure caused some havoc.
And that's part of the problem. We don't know. We can't say this fire or this freeze is climate related.
Yeah.
What we can say is weather patterns are changing.
Mhm.
What we can say is colder is getting colder and hotter is getting hotter. Wet is getting wetter and dry is getting drier.
Mhm.
And right now for us in the West Coast, it's dry. And that means fire and smoke. So if the question is, what can you as a congregation do, or what should you as a family do, or what can your neighborhood do, right? You don't need to worry about hurricanes.
Yay.
Yay, quite frankly.
Check that off.
yeah.
So
But
do
the-
we need to worry about tornadoes here?
Not so much. We get a few little winds, cyclones and things here. Right? Number one, I don't want you to have to worry about anything. That's not the point, is to make you worried. But the point is to think about, because I think it's the question you're asking is, how does one prepare? So I mentioned the word resiliency, right, earlier on. Resiliency, adaptation, mitigation, preparation. There's 4 words I would like you to know. Resiliency, adaptation, mitigation, preparation, when it comes to climate change issues and disaster preparedness issues. Preparation's easy, right? I mean, to understand what it means. Get your go bag, get a plan, get that 2 weeks of food. Oh, by the way, Oregon Department of Health now says a month of food,
Wow.
right? If you want to be prepared for like things like the big one, lots of water, right?
Mhm.
There's guidelines for all sorts of this sort of thing, right? The question is, do we do it? And the answer is no, because it seems silly to have a month's worth of water in your house or a hand crank radio or all sorts of things like that. But that's a choice, preparation for that. Plans. So Lyle, do you got another route you can take to get out of your house? Probably not.
Nope.
So either you stay put longer or you get out of there sooner, or you get in line, right?
Yeah.
What if your car has no gas in it? Didn't fill it up last time. You're not going to sit in that line for very long, are you? Right? You know, so there's just lots of things where it's helpful to get together with people and say, what do we need to think about? And I'm sorry you didn't get the emergency manager from the county to come talk to you, because that's their job.
Mhm.
And even though John's leaving, that person's not. Have a forum, have a retreat, have a weekend day where that person comes in and starts to talk to you about what you can do. That's what they're for.
So Prince of Lifers, that's Eben Polk. EBENPOLK.
I don't know him personally.
I'll bet Kurt Torgerson does.
Kurt does. Yeah. Kurt works with him.
So this is the fun part. You're a community of people who know people,
Mhm.
right? You are a community of people who know people. Use those connections.
Mm.
Preparedness is one thing. Resilience is another word. And I introduced Sarah Kruger to you on the screen because resilience or resiliency is her language. It's even disasters response language. And I'll tell you why. LDR, FEMA, anybody in the disaster world knows we can't keep up. We look at climate change, what's coming, and in my opinion, they're all scared spitless.
Mm.
So a problem with wildfires are up and down the West Coast. You only got so many firefighters, right? So many college kids who are doing somewhere, what else?
Mhm.
And it used to be that Montana or Idaho would share with Washington, Washington would share with California, California would share with New Mexico, New Mexico would share with Oregon, depending upon where the fires were. We don't have enough to go around anymore, and we haven't for a couple of years. We do not have enough crews to share anymore because they're all busy in their own place. Even if it's not a designated natural disaster, those folks are really busy. right? And you go, well, we need more firefighters. Well, who's going to pay for those? Budget implications, all those sorts of questions. And so FEMA, those folks are pretty worried about this. FEMA is delighted, excuse my politics, but they're delighted they now get to use the word climate change. They did not get to use that term under the Trump administration. They were forbidden to talk about climate change.
Yeah.
Now they say at every chance they get, climate change, climate change, climate change. We have to talk about this because we do, right? So there's a new conversation coming from them, as well as racial equity. What do you imagine racial equity has to do with disaster or climate change, for that matter?
I would say folks on the lower end of the economic scale live in places that are more prone to the effects of climate change.
They're unable to react to it.
Yeah.
All get gold stars. Number one, people of color, for the most part, I shouldn't say that. People of color live disproportionately in high-risk areas for natural disasters, whether they be Latino folks who work in the forests or orchards, right? Lower income folks who live in the bad part of town, right, et cetera, et cetera. So people of color are disproportionately affected by any and every disaster, period, including COVID.
Yeah.
COVID. We know that those folks also receive less financial aid from FEMA and other government agencies. Why is a complicated question, but the statistics are clear. Statistics are clear. More than that, and now you're just getting me, but not just me, but I mean, the same dynamics which have led us to climate change lead us to white supremacy and racial injustice in this country. The thought that people who aren't white Americans are resources, or the trees are resources, or the lakes are resources for me to use the way I want, extends to people of color and our attitude toward them. That's what systemic racism means. So when you start to dig into this world, right, it gets uncomfortable. So anything you do as a church to build community resilience, anything you do as a church to feed hungry people, anything you do as a church to care about equity and people of color, anything you do as a church that addresses climate change is helping prevent disasters. Or, to say it differently, anything you do as a church that builds community resilience means that those people in your community will be better able to respond to a disaster. Did homeless people know about the heat dome?
What about the heat dome?
Did homeless folks know about the heat dome?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're out in it.
When it happened, did they know it was coming?
Probably not.
Probably not. Did the Latino population in Clackamas County know the fires were coming?
Well, who knew those fires were coming?
Did they get the word to evacuate?
Oh, I don't know.
I will tell you the answer is no.
Okay.
Because you don't have bilingual resources out there, because you don't have a very large Latino population in Clackamas, right? Compared to some areas in the state. So we've got language barriers, we've got all sorts of things going on here. That's a bigger picture issue, right? But what I'm trying to say is, as a Christian community, anything you do to build relationships among people in your community is a win. Yes, make your parking lot available, yes, but anything you do. I'm talking too much. I was talking to a congregation up in Vancouver, Washington. They said, we had a heat shelter, nobody came, right? And I said, maybe in my head, I forget if I actually said this to them, just out of my head, I said, well, do any people know you care and are you connected to your community? If they don't know they can go to you for stuff, they're not going to come to you and think you have a heat shelter there. And by the way, they don't have access to the things that tell them where these shelters are. So do people in Oregon City or the surrounds know the Prince of Life is a dependable place for them to be? Right? And any ministries you do for the community, whether they be feeding ministries or dinners or shelters. Everything you do helps people know these people care and I can depend upon them in a time of need. Otherwise, they don't know.
I think because the stuff we do goes out into the community, people don't come to the church to get those assets.
Right.
So they don't know that we're a center. We might put the backpacks together, right, at Prince of Light, but they go to a school or they go to a food pantry. Yeah, we didn't get a lot of people at that cooling shelter. I got maybe 3 or 4 the whole weekend. 2 of them were our members. A couple came from an apartment that didn't have air conditioning.
So number one, the fact that you do backpack buddies or whatever, that's a huge gift, right? And Lutherans are not good about saying made for you by Prince of Life Lutheran Church.
No.
Here's our address. We don't do that. I'm not asking you to do that. But what I'm saying is part of ministry is that people do make a connection with who's doing this so they know who they can call. And you all do the balance with that, right? The heat shelter, those 3 people, will tell their friends the story of
and this is going to happen again. And we have an LED sign that puts it out there. I put it on Facebook. It went on the little banner on the TV screen. So even if we only got a couple of people, the word got out that we are a good place to come, maybe for the next time.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm trying to say. You want to, if you're serious about helping folks, you need to start building a reputation.
Right.
Now, the fact is that many, if not most, homeless folks actually do have cell phones. Right? Or I don't know the numbers, but I know a lot of folks do, right? Have cell phones. And the county or your city will put cooling shelters at such and such a place.
Right.
Some folks can find those things out. Some folks can't. But, well, I'm talking too much. What else are you thinking here as we're talking? I didn't mean to just jabber the whole time.
No, I like your idea of maybe calling together, the neighbors in our fellowship hall and say, hey, let's talk about disaster preparedness. And here's what a go bag would be. And we bring in Evan Polk from the county and we bring 3 or 4 people on a panel, somebody from the police department, somebody from fire, who knows?
Right.
And we just say, let's get ready. We want to help you do that. I mean, that sounds like loving your neighbor, right?
And it's a relatively non-threatening thing for a church to do.
Yeah, we're not proselytizing.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who aren't going to walk through a church door, period.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm honest. It's not safe to them. They don't perceive it safe or useful.
Yeah.
But
Dave, we've got Cub Scouts, 3 Girl Scout troops, and an NA group. If I invited all of those people to show up in the fellowship hall, they've been there before. They know it's a safe place, right? So there's 100 people right there.
And you probably have, through the scouting groups, materials they have.
Sure.
So they could share the leadership and share the conversations. It's not just something you're doing.
Use the partnerships.
Jan Weirman and I have found, as we do our work, Jan Weirman is a volunteer through the Oregon Synod, that many people are motivated by the question of what can they do for their family to keep them safe. And that's kind of a core issue, right? So you will get people who will come to a preparedness fair if you say, we're going to show you how to make a go bag. We're going to talk about the things you should think about in terms of an escape plan.
Yeah.
Have you considered how you're going to get hold of your children if the cell towers go down? People are like, oh my God, I hadn't thought about that.
Right.
And they're going to come for those kind of resources. And we have them. They're a dime a dozen. You just have to pull them out and use them. But that builds connections, that builds relationships, and therefore builds resiliency in your community. That's the goal.
Right.
I'll tell you, Lutheran disaster response is not going to ride in on a white horse and take care of the problem. That's not what they're for. They can't do it. They may give some monies that people like you have generously donated through the Oregon Synod for different grants and help. But, if every one of the houses that we own burns down here, they can't rebuild those.
Right.
FEMA is the group that does that if the disaster is bad enough that it gets a FEMA designation,
Mm.
right? If FEMA comes in, so the Labor Day fires was Labor Day of 2020.
Mhm.
There are still a couple hundred families living in motel rooms from that fire,
Wow.
and FEMA is engaged.
And they're really slow.
They're very slow. I mean, it was appalling to me. And I don't want to bash people who are trying to do good things, right? But FEMA came in. Do they have case managers in the state? No, they don't, right? So they have to train case managers. Whether the state does that or FEMA does that was an issue for a while. LDR actually stepped in to help train some of those people because we know how to do that. So that was a gift of your church to the whole state of Oregon, was to train some disaster case managers.
Yeah.
Then people who have lost have to apply. You know, they have to go to a case manager and say, we lost our home or whatever, and they have to demonstrate that that's the truth, right? And then they apply for a loan. They always get turned down the first time. Always.
Huh.
The application is to the small business department of the government. I don't know why. That's how the system works. They almost always get turned down the first time. They're
Because they
told,
want to see how serious you are, huh?
I don't know what the deal is, right? And maybe I'm overstating the case, but oh my goodness, right? So most people have to apply more than once,
Mhm.
right? And now we're 6 months into the process, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah. Are these the cities of Talent and Phoenix, outside of Medford? Dayton, I think, had some fires.
Detroit.
Detroit, I mean, some of the towns were
Detroit, yeah.
totally. That was new for us. That was new for us. Just the whole town's taken out.
Yeah.
I mentioned the flooding up in Whatcom County in northwestern Washington, right? Those folks are commuting 45 minutes to an hour because there's no housing in the area. It's all overpriced. They've lost them. There's none available, right? Have you checked the cost of labor lately, or the price of timber?
Right.
I mean, it's so.
Yeah.
So we got some issues as a society to figure out here. That's my point. You as a church can do whatever it is the Spirit maybe calls you to do. And it's the small things that you can do that's the appropriate thing. You're not going to solve climate change. You're not going to solve FEMA's issues, right? But you can help build community resilience.
Mhm.
And you can prepare. That was two of the words that I would like you to hold on to.
Yeah.
And mitigation or climate change words, which ask different questions, right?
Rob talked about those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure what Rob said, I would agree with, I suspect Rob said was, if you really want to address climate change, you're talking about political action.
Yeah, he did.
You are.
Advocacy.
And
Yeah.
ELC does advocacy, other folks do advocacy.
Yeah.
That's a different world. If you want to do adaptation and you're in a fireplace, a fire area, I would look at your roof and see if you got a cedar shingles or not.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
They look nice and they're very folksy, right?
No way.
They're real flammable.
And they're real flammable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate asphalt shingles and they are terrible for the environment, but if you live in a fire area, that's what you want on your
Yeah.
Or metal.
or metal.
Hmm.
Steel standing roof, that's better. My wife and I have a cabin up in Welch's on Mount Hood, right?
Mhm.
It's just a small thing on a small lot. We were looking for insurance, fire insurance. The first person we talked to said you need a 30-foot berm all around your property with no trees and stuff.
Wow.
That's the whole property.
Oh,
And we did not move there to plow it down and put gravel on it. That's why.
right. Right.
So we found somebody who understands the area and gives us fire insurance, but we got trees growing within 8 feet of the
Sure.
cabin. And I'm not cutting them down. I'm sorry. That's why we're there.
Yeah.
So there are things you can do, right? And we've done some, make sure none of the branches are rubbing against the building, et cetera, et cetera.
Recently, PGE come out, said that identified areas where they're going to shut power off now in case of fire danger. And
Yes.
Oregon City, where I live, is one of those areas where they could potentially just shut off the power.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so then what? If you've lost your air conditioning, you've lost refrigeration, you've lost ability to cook if you don't have a gas cooktop,
And Lyle, why would they shut off your power?
because they don't want their power lines to contribute to fire.
Mhm.
You know, like we've seen in other parts of the country. I get it, but man, if you don't have a generator, what a huge inconvenience. And so that's probably another time when you need to consider it's time to go if you don't have power.
Mhm.
So you've probably seen down in California, the Paradise Fire, the campfires,
Right.
utility folks are being sued
Yep.
Uh,
for those fires because they
you
presumably
didn't shut it off soon enough, right?
down power lines, right? So we're all rethinking this,
Yeah.
right? And you
Yeah.
better believe PGG, whoever's going like, yeah, we better shut off the power and make Lyle mad. That's a better solution.
Yeah.
The risk of fire.
You know, and that includes a lot of grocery stores in the area, includes our church.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a scenario I look forward to.
So do you have a generator? Do you have solar panels? Do you have, I mean, there's all sorts of questions which are, again, adaptive. You got to have money to make these things happen.
I have a small generator that I use during the ice storm. I do have solar panels, but I don't have battery systems, so they're useless when the power goes out.
But that was a learning for me. I'm glad you understand that. That was a learning for me was just because you got solar panels, if they're tied into the grid, which most of the systems are, if the grid's off, your solar panels are useless.
That's right.
You don't even need batteries. You just need some way to get it to connect to your lamp. But we don't have that either, right?
No, once the inverter's off, you're stuck. It don't work no more.
That can be resolved, but again, right?
Yeah. For a small fee.
Would a generator do much good at the church?
Well, if it was big enough, but when you're looking at a commercial building like that,
Yeah.
you know, I don't think I'd want a portable one. I think well, I guess you could do a portable one, but you're gonna need to hook up a transfer switch setup, which you get into electrical panels and you select what circuit you're going to operate with the generator.
Mhm.
So you switch it over to the generator and you have, you know, maybe the air conditioning, some
Mhm.
lights, you know,
Refrigeration, maybe?
maybe, you know, you do a study or an audit and decide what you want to do, and then you
Right.
size the generator. And either if it's portable, if it can be portable, size wise, then you got to store it somewhere, and you always got to have gas for it. You got to maintain it.
Yeah.
Or you can do a permanent installation where you mount it out there in the
Mm.
flower bed and run natural gas to it and hope there's
Uh-huh.
natural gas. And when the power goes out, it automatically fires up. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
for a small fee,
Yeah.
you know, there's always options out there, but
Yeah. Do you want to pay for it?
you want to pay for it. Yep. That's
Mhm.
just
Fun
it.
thing for a church to do, a fun thing to do. And again, I'll push the regional congregational network again to you because we talk about things like that. But a fun thing for the church to do is to do a disaster assessment of your building, right?
Mhm.
Trinity Lutheran and Gresham did this. They just walked around the building going like, what would happen in this room if, right?
Mm.
Could we be a triage center for medical emergencies, you know? Like, well, not at the sanctuary because there's a bunch of there's a bunch of stained glass that's going to shatter and fall on people. So we're not using that room, you know.
Mhm.
And this room is, you know, has this capacity and doesn't have that capacity, but it's sort of a spring cleaning. What can we do here?
Mhm.
Lyle, I'm so glad you said that about the generator. The question would be, what do you want to run off your generator?
Yeah.
Probably not the pipe organ, but probably the stove and the refrigerator and lights in the kitchen, right? I mean, if you think you're going to have,
Right.
but that's something you could imagine. What could our facility be useful for?
Mhm.
And if we were going to prepare for, you're not asking how are we going to hold Sunday morning services, I doubt.
Right.
No.
How can we be of service to the community
Yeah.
in a crisis?
We have 300 apartments right next to us. A lot of people. Now they have a community room over there, but you know, I don't know what would happen over there in terms of a disaster.
Do they have a generator?
I don't know.
Why don't you know? Go talk to these people. Know your neighbors. I mean, I'm just tongue in cheek, but it's kind of like,
Sure.
this is a no duh.
Get to know the resources around you.
Right.
And we've been thinking about disaster. We know we're neighbors. We don't know what capacities you have or what we could do for you in case of emergency. You have anybody wants to talk about that. If they don't, they don't. If they do, have a conversation.
I assume there's an assessment, some kind of inventory on the LDR site. If you want to do an evaluation of your building.
I could help you find such a thing. I'm trying to get the LDR West. I'm trying to get those things on there over time. So,
Okay.
John, you know the ELC website.
I do.
They're hard to navigate.
Yeah.
But you know, there's lots of things from Red Cross. There's lots of things from state governments. There's lots of things, right. I would like to make it more convenient for you, but a little digging, you'll find those things.
Yeah. By the way, Red Cross showed up, called me and said, "Do you need volunteers? We're sending you volunteers for the cooling shelter."
Oh, nice.
I had 4 or 5 Red Cross volunteers. They brought water. They were great. They wanted to partner up.
So hear me now. Yes, these groups want to partner up, and they may want to partner up enough that they would buy you a generator. I mean, this is what I don't know that. This is what partnerships are about.
Yeah.
Right? Chris Kramer always asks this question, John. Chris Kramer is the pastor I mentioned in Nativity Lutheran Church in Bend. Whenever they get an idea, he always asks, "So I wonder who would want to buy that for us?" He always assumes there's somebody out there who wants to buy stuff for them, and he's often right.
That's great.
Often right. There are nonprofits and all sorts of groups that want to partner with whomever. We don't have as much money as we would like as churches, but we got spaces and we've got a building. We've got partners, right?
Yep.
So the gig is, as you get the hang of this, to start to go looking around. And as you build those partnerships with Red Cross and they get to know each other with other folks, they say, you know, I know somebody who's got generators. You know?
Yeah.
Home Depot actually wants to partner with you and give you, I mean,
little donation, right? For tax reasons.
Yep.
Yeah.
It just takes some working and planning, and people need to know you're serious. Not just looking for a free generator.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's not out of the question. That's all I'm saying.
Dave, I think we're going to call it a night. It's after 8.
Okay.
This has been really helpful. Thank you.
Well, I talked more than I intended to, but that often happens. So
No, it's fun. We got a chance to do Q&A.
Yeah.
Any final questions?
Well,
Boom.
yeah,
Very
I have one final comment. When you were talking about our personal go bags, for
Yes.
example, in case of disaster, I could say, well, we need a couple of 10-gallon containers for all the water we need to store, or for some of it. So go to the store, and get shot by some 18-year-old who got an AR-15 for his birthday. Well, you're talking about kind of world we live in. That's what comes to my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a whole other kind of disaster we haven't talked about, right? The social disaster.
We actually, after one of the church shootings, we had one of our Oregon City police officers come in, and he was a member of ours, Matt Pascal, talked about, what do you do if a shooter comes into your sanctuary on a Sunday morning? He said, grab a hymn book. That's a weapon. Start throwing hymn books at him. Yeah, whatever you can find.
It just hurts my heart to have to ask that question.
You have to think about it. I know.
Yeah.
FEMA has resources for churches, cybersecurity and physical security. That's a big thing for them. You know, mosques, churches, etc. What do you do? And we're like, oh God, do we have to give self-defense training to our ushers? I mean, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
And that question, that's a good solution. Hymnals and weapons. Just if everybody started throwing a hymnal at them, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, what have we come to? It's real, but it's real, right?
Yeah.
What you need to have is a head usher or a pastor who says, every time you start throwing it at the sky. I mean, people will freeze. They will hide. They won't know what to do. And I don't want to have hymnal throwing drills.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly.
I've heard stories too where the ushers they have a gun.
Right.
Yep.
Some of the bigger churches do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you, when we were dealing with sexuality issues at the church, in 2009, when we had the vote of gay lesbians,
Mhm.
Our presiding bishop had bodyguards,
Wow.
right?
Oh,
Because of the fear that the church would be, attacked. And I was doing a communion service in the course of this for the Rexide in Christ community. They asked me to be preside at communion for their service. And I went there a little earlier before the service to get lined up, and they said, okay, there'll be 2 people at the communion rail. I said, why? They said, to keep you safe.
wow.
We will get you at the altar. I'm going like, nobody told me somebody might be trying to get to me.
Yeah.
May I rethink my offer to celebrate?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All right.
very real. So thank you, Gary. For
David, thank you.
that.
Well done.
John, you got my email, dave@climateimagination.com. If I could do anything for you or you're looking
Okay.
for resources, let me know.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pass all this along to everybody else.
I've
'Cause I'm
got one
heading out on
last
the 5th. Yeah,
little
Joyce?
comment. Well, sometimes we give a little bit extra to something else. And sometimes it's Lutheran disaster response. I like to give to Global Mission because we had a daughter that was
Yes.
with Global Mission in Africa for 2 years. So if I give to the national, I get the little things from Daniel Riff. He writes little, and I can designate. If I send money to disaster, can I designate it comes to the Western region? Or do you get a part of what we sent? I mean, it's not much.
Any percentage for selling product. I usually LDR asks for donations by disaster type. So
Okay.
it would be easy to designate for wildfires. And that's going to come back to the Western region.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's your gift. You can designate for whatever you want.
Yeah, and like I said, or I like to give to women's projects, especially. So,
Sure.
yeah.
But usually, Lutheran Disaster usually says we are now collecting for a hurricane or disaster or fire, and 100% of your gift will go for direct aid or something like that. That's usually what they say. But when you just give proactively, not in one of those situations, you can designate it however you like. And if you want, Joyce, yes, you can put for support of Western Region Ministries. That would be delightful.
All right.
And that will go for, I would hope that would go for Sarah's work. But also there's projects. And John, I know you can go away if you want, if you've got time. I'm here for the duration. Camp Lutherwood, do you know Camp Lutherwood in down there in
Oh, yeah.
Center of Oregon? They have just put together a new project called Compass, which is on-site camping for children survivors of wildfires. There's a lot of trauma associated with that. And they are tailoring programs to give those kids camping experiences for about $5 a week.
Wow.
Everybody can afford it, right? And Lutheran Disaster Response just gave them a very large grant to help them pay for those kids to come and develop their curriculum. So the work goes for things like that as well. It's not just disaster response. That would be disaster resiliency. That would be disaster trying to help folks. So there's lots of great things like that going on, which are fun too. Well, I hope this was helpful. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yes. Thank you.
Know
Was
this
it
Dan
Thank
and
you.
I are here, and the Oregon team.
All right. This group may have you back.
Thank you. And
I'll-
John, bless. Between now and the next 2 weeks, you take care of this guy and his wife, okay?
They're doing a good job.
10 days.
Tie him
gonna have
up
a
and
nice-
not let him go.
We're going to have a fun party.
Yeah.
10 days, but who's counting, huh?